Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Nic Whitham, who is co-owner of Banyan Retreat in the UK, specializing in spiritual mediumship development and natural healing modalities. Now semi-retired and making classes available online now that Banyan Retreat Center has closed due to the COVID pandemic. Nic has returned to the northwest of England, close to where he grew up, and is settled with his partner, Stephen, and dog, where they enjoy the beautiful countryside surrounding their new home. Born into a family of healers and developing his own healing ability from around the age of 15, Nic has a great understanding of healing and communication with the spirit world. He is now offering online healing classes to people from all around the world, and he loves to share his understanding of healing who all share this interest. Today, we're going to talk about Soul Quest, which he offers every Sunday, an online contemplation, beautiful session where participants channel healing energy for peace and the benefit of humanity and Mother Earth. And there's a lot more to be said, but we are going to be talking about all of that today. You are the co-chair of the Spiritual Truth Foundation, which we'll talk about today also, and the beautiful charity. How do you spell the charity again? Demelza.
Demelza House.
Yeah, so we'll be
Demelza
talking
Children's Hospice.
Yes, I want to talk to you more about that. So welcome back to the program, Nic.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
You're welcome. And I have your
pleasure to be here.
Good. I have your brand new book here, which I'm so excited about. Science and Spirit, a Healing Journey. After all the many years you have been doing this, to now have, have it to share with the world in a book. That's wonderful. So congratulations on that. So let's start at the beginning when you were a child. How did all this begin?
Well, I was born into a family of healers. My mother was a Reiki healer, and my father was a trance healer. He did a lot of work at the spiritualist churches, and he sat in a development circle to develop his own healing abilities and mediumistic abilities. And when I was about 7 years old, he'd injured his back at work, and the medium of the circle came over to our house to give him healing. She was a trance medium, an excellent trance medium who had many spirit entities who worked with her. But for the healing, it was an African Zulu gentleman, a medicine man, who would entrance her. And during this session that I remember so vividly, he would cup his hands sort of like this, and he would be blowing into my father's back. And of course, I was 7 years old. I found this highly amusing. I thought, what on earth is he doing? And it really sort of piqued my interest. And from that point on, I paid much more interest in his visits, and also when other people came for healing to the house. And I had frequent conversations with other spirit entities through the medium of the circle. And when I was about 15 years old, we were having a conversation one day, and the spirit entity said to me, so what do you plan to do with your life? And I'd really been thinking about that in recent weeks and months, just prior to this conversation. And I said, I think I'd really like to do some work for the spirit world. I'd like to be involved. I'd like to contribute, ideally to be a medium. And he said to me, good. He said, but not yet. He said, go away, live your life, enjoy your life. He said, and there'll come a time when you work for my world. He said, but that time isn't yet. And I moved to London, and I worked in various places, and eventually I worked for a an American investment company, and I was based in Hong Kong. And there came a point where things were about to change, and I had opportunities that I could take advantage of in many parts of the world, in Australia, the UK, the US, pretty much wherever I wanted. And I came home and I asked him for some guidance. And I said, look, here are my options, and I'm not quite sure what to do. And he said, well, let me tell you. He said, you recall the conversation we had when I told you to go away and enjoy your life, have a working life first. And he said, well, we're at that point now where it's time for you to come home and work for my world. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what happened. I came back, and in the months prior to that, I've been having dreams about Banyan, the physical aspects of Banyan, as opposed to its actual location. And when Stephen and I were looking for a venue, we spent about 3 years trying to find the right place. We probably found it earlier, but we were looking in the wrong direction. We came across Banyan and we walked in there, and I was recognizing different aspects from what I'd seen in my dreams. And I said to him, this is the place. Wow. And within a matter of months, we'd moved in there. I was still working in the city because there was lots of preparation to be done there. So I still needed an income for a little while. But eventually that faded away and we arrived at Banyan.
So interesting.
But of course, there were many things that took place throughout the middle part of that period in the gap that I haven't covered. Right. Part of which was when I first moved to London and I was working in London, I met a wonderful medium called, at that time she was Colette Simpson, later to become Colette Brewerton. And she lived in a small flat in Highgate in London, and we would sit in development each week. We'd have queues of people on a Wednesday evening who would come for healing, and they would come in and out, a bit like a conveyor system, really, with people coming and going. Hundreds of people with all different types of conditions that were in need of healing. And we dedicated as much time as we possibly could to working with those people. And after that, we would sit in the development circle and we'd receive guidance. She was also a very good trance medium, and a lot of her communicators would come forward and give us guidance and advice. And also around that time, Colette asked us to go and visit this young child who was suffering with leukemia. And 2 or 3 times a week we would go and visit and give healing. And probably within about 3 or 4 months, it became quite obvious that this child was getting more and more ill, and it eventually passed to the spirit world. And I had a real hard time with that. I couldn't understand how this God that we have would allow this to happen. And I was quite angry with him at the time. And I then figured that being angry wasn't a particularly good situation to be in. And perhaps I should begin to explore and understand far more than I had. And it was really at that point in time where I discovered Silver Birch, the teachings of Silver Birch. Silver Birch was the communicator through, who at that time was the editor of the Psychic News here in the UK. He was a Jewish gentleman who came from the East End of London, didn't really understand about spiritualism or the work that he was about to get involved in. And he was invited to a circle one evening and thought he'd fallen asleep. But when he came back, he was told that he'd been entranced and he was giving wonderful communication. And that was the start of his development and his journey and the teachings of Silver Birch, which are now all managed by the Spiritual Truth Foundation. So reading as much as I could. I was working in the city at the time, and there was a wonderful bookstore just opposite the museum in London, the British Museum. And every Wednesday I would walk up to this bookshop. I think it was called the Aquarius bookshop or something. And I'd buy a new Silver Birch book, and I spend the whole week reading it, and couldn't wait for the next week to go and buy another one. Mm-hmm. And Silver Birch taught me a huge amount that I'd never taken into consideration before. And even today, I can still read those Silver Birch books, and I get so much from them still, because the ageless, timeless philosophy that he gave all those years ago is as relevant today as it was the time he gave it. And you really can just learn so much. And that's really how I became involved with, or how I got to know a little to a lot more about Silver Birch. And of course, many years passed out after that. And probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I was invited by a very good friend of mine to become a trustee of the Spiritual Truth Foundation. And things progressed. I got more and more involved, and now take care of most of the accounting side of things, the distribution of the books, and of course I'm co-chair with my colleagues, and it really now occupies a significant part of my life. Very recently, we launched a new website which contains all the journals to the Noah's Ark Society. The Noah's Ark Society, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, had a very heavy focus on physical mediumship and what was happening in the day. Now that all those journals are available, is the Noah's Ark Society Archive.org. And you can read about everything that was happening in physical circles pretty much around the world at that time. So that was a really interesting project for me too, because I have a huge interest in physical mediumship. Mm-hmm. And currently we're working on yet another website, which contains a lot of information from, and a lot of copies of, the American publication Psychic Observer and Chimes Magazine. And that's going to be announced sometime a little later this month. And you can go back and you can read the newspaper articles in that magazine from around about 1934 right through to more recent times. There's full copies of most of them with a huge amount of information, and I'm loving going through them and learning so much more, because of course we know a lot about the UK pioneers of mediumship, but we're not taught very much over here about the American pioneers, apart from, sort of the better known ones, the Bang sisters and people of that ilk. The other lesser known mediums are not really spoken of very much over here. So it's a huge archive, and with an enormous amount of information for people to read and to and to absorb. So I'm really enjoying that at the moment. And as I
Mm.
said, that will be made available a little later this month.
Wow, what a lot of great information. I ran out and, well, didn't run out, I did it online, but I bought 5 books from Silver Birch after I heard an interview of yours. I got the little book series, and I'm really enjoying reading those. So back to little girl with leukemia and and just being so devastated by that. I heard you say in another interview that you learned, and I assume it is from Silver Birch, that is a question I have, is that you say that it's the soul's decision when it's time to transition. All the healing in the world won't change that. So how did that realization come to be? Was it through the teachings?
No, it wasn't actually. That was more recent events when a very good friend of mine was quite ill, and we were told in confidence by communicators in the circle in which I sat that the decision had been made at the soul level that things would present themselves over the coming weeks, and the decision had been made for the soul to migrate to the spirit world. Now, of course, once that decision is made by the soul, there's a period of time where the body begins to shut down and to prepare for that transition.
Mm.
Now, I think it's really important to mention here that although I said that all the healing in the world will not stop that transition, it's still equally as important to continue with the healing,
Yes.
because that healing will aid in the smoother transition of that soul to the spirit world. So yes, healing shouldn't stop. And I also believe, and I've been told by friends in the spirit world, that the soul is aware that it's going to transition probably about 6 weeks prior, at least 6 weeks prior to it actually transitioning. Sometimes, and that's even the case in incidents of fatal accidents where we
Right.
think they are instantaneous, that they're instant accidents, but they also tell us that accidents are actually just a result of cause and effect. And although we may see them as accident, they are known in advance by the soul. And it's also quite possible for the spirit world to take the soul before, for an example, if someone is in a fall and it's obvious that they're not going to survive that fall because it's from such a great height, they can actually take the soul prior to the impact so that they are spared that experience, if you like.
Yes. Yes. So from what you've been told, what I hear you saying is that there's a divine plan for everyone, and including the time that one transitions.
Okay. I think my friends in the spirit world would disagree with divine plan as such, because then we think that our lives have a blueprint, and we're also told that that isn't the case. But they can see just a little further ahead than we can. And the soul is obviously aware of its demise at least 6 weeks prior to those events.
Right, right. Interesting. So let's segue a little bit and talk about your beautiful new book and all of the all of the healing that you've done and you talk about in your book. How, first of all, why did you finally decide to write this book? And also, I'd love to, I'm sure the listeners and I would love to hear, how can one learn to heal themselves or begin that process?
Okay. Let's start with, I mean, I've been, as I mentioned, I've been healing for many, many years, and I've researched many healing modalities along the way. A lot of them have connection with energy medicine, and many of them I mention in the book.
Yes.
Going way back as far as Dr. Royal Rife in the States in the 20s, 30s, 40s, when he was curing cancer in people, in groups of people, not just individuals, and basically using the same methodology that we use in healing today. Everything in the physical world has a vibration, and the diseased cells and the disease and the viruses within our bodies have a vibration. And if you can find a frequency that resonates with that same vibration, it will destroy the virus. In exactly the same way that the opera singer, when their voice resonates with the glass will shatter.
Right.
Exactly the same principle with diseased cells in the body. And Rife grasped that and was able to use his frequency machine to cure any number of ailments many, many, many years ago. And then, of course, the establishment found out and weren't happy and closed him down. But that principle of healing is really, as my knowledge grew about healing, exactly the same principle is used. I got very involved in the work of Dr. Harry Elfield and his electrocrystal therapy. A number of years ago, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I was given statins, as is the way these days. And within probably about possibly just over 2 months, my energy began to dissipate, and I was finding it difficult to stand, difficult to walk, and really didn't know what was going on. But I knew instinctively that it was these drugs that were causing the problem. Mm-hmm. And I went back to the doctor, and he said, yeah, no problem, keep trying them, you'll be fine. And it reached a point where one day I couldn't stand up. And again, I knew instinctively it was these drugs, and I said to the doctor, okay, that's it, I'm not taking them anymore. And I stopped. And it took me a number of months to actually recover from that, but I did recover. I felt very much as though I was going to have a heart attack, because the heart is a muscle. And as the muscle enzymes were being destroyed by statins, I was just losing all my strength. Wow. And as part of that experience, I needed something that was going to help me to recover. And that's when I discovered Harry's work, got very much involved in the electrocrystal therapy and his diagnostic system, the biofield viewer, or the polycontrast interference photography, as it was called at the time. And realized again that it was using that same principle of frequency to destroy whatever condition was present, finding the right frequency to make that effect. And in more recent times, talking to my friends in the spirit world, I've asked a couple of them for a detailed explanation of what actually happens when we're channeling healing to somebody who's in need. And one of them gave a very elaborate description, which is detailed in the book. Mm-hmm. But he said, the healer is only the channel for that healing energy that's brought by the people who work with that healer in the spirit world. Not only is the healing channeled by the person in the spirit world and the instrument, the medium themselves, the healer, it also relies heavily on other people connected to the person being healed in the spirit world. They gather around in a large group. There are many people involved, and they channel healing directly to that individual. If the outcome can be changed and the condition can be removed, then the person will recover. But there are instances, the human body is very fragile. And there are instances where sometimes that just isn't possible and the inevitable will happen. Mm-hmm. So I was able to sort of join the dots at that point. And I also read some of the teachings of Silver Birch, who also detailed exactly the same thing, pretty much word for word, and also the teachings of Red Cloud through one of the UK's greatest mediums, Estelle Roberts. There was all these aspects were coming together, and I was beginning to realize that they were all telling me the same thing. I've taught healing probably for the past 15, at least the past 15 years, and obviously been here for much longer than that. And when Banyan closed as a center for people to come together, I knew that my opportunities for healing were going to be somewhat limited. And yes, I can do those online. I can offer healing courses online, but I can't actually teach people hands-on healing. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible via Zoom. So I needed to get all that information that I managed to pull together and tie together in my head on paper to share with others. And to be honest, I don't care if it only goes out to a handful, if it's only sold to a handful of people, it doesn't matter. The information is there and it's there to be shared. And I'm sure, I leave it to the spirit world, for those who are interested, they will find the book and they will absorb the knowledge that's contained within it. So really, it's the sum of my knowledge as of this point in time. And for me, it was important that I had that for people to understand. Bringing together what many people have said in the past into one book. So hopefully all those different, they can read about all those different aspects as I detail them in the book. And by the end of it, they will grasp that concept and fully understand, or understand as much as I do. I'm sure I only know the tip of the iceberg about healing. There's much more to learn. But at least that little bit I can bring together and I can share with people.
Well, it's such a beautiful book. I will show it again. And what I love about it is that it's for beginners or people who are already involved in the healing field, and it's so readable. It's just a great book. I wanted to ask you, it's so interesting listening to you talk, because the Western world has just become so, it seems like we've gone backwards, away from all the things you're talking about. And I do think that things are changing, and I'd like to know your thoughts on that. But you just, when you speak, it's just with such a knowing. And is it just after all these years, and have you seen so much over and over, and you just, how is it that you came just to have this knowing, this surrender, really.
Going back to when I first read the Silver Birch books, the more I read, the more I wanted to know, and the more I knew that there was far more to life than what I was able to physically touch here. I was fortunate that I was brought up in a family of believers,
yes,
and communicators, and from a very early age, having had that communication with the spirit world, gave me such a good grounding to start that work from. And over the years, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in different circles and being involved with greater aspects of spiritualism or mediumship, that over the years it ceased to be, is it possible that these things are there? Because they were actually part of my life.
Yes.
I spent more of my life speaking to dead people than I did speaking to the living, which is quite bizarre, but there's a difference. And when you speak to the spirit world, and it's really the spirit world, you receive so much more than that. You feel the presence of those people. And I probably have now a good handful of friends in the spirit world that I've never met in this world, who I feel so close to. I'm fortunate enough to be able to speak to them in my mind, and if I'm very lucky, I can hear their responses. And if I'm not in the right headspace, then it probably goes out of the window, and they're probably as frustrated with me at that point in time as I can be at trying to absorb that information. But I've listened to the teachings and I've read many books, and it's now just an accepted part of my life that nobody will ever convince me that it's any other way.
Yeah.
There were events that took place during my late teens when I first moved to London, and I was feeling quite homesick, and I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. And I'd already started development to a certain degree, and I'd lie on my bed in the evening, and I would feel the presence of the spirit world drawing very close to me. And I went home and was having a chat one day with the leader of my father's circle, and he said, now, when you lie on the bed at night, he said, you will feel your legs, they'll feel like they're burning. And I said, yes, that's right, I do. When I close my eyes and I invited this for a while, he said, well, I want you to know that that's me. He said, when you feel that sensation in your legs, know that it's me. And that was such a great comfort, because I could do that anytime.
Yes.
Anytime I felt a little bit lower, I was a little bit homesick, I'd go lie down and I think of that, and it would be there. It didn't last for very long, and for one reason or another, my development was interrupted from time to time throughout those years. But again, when Stephen and I opened Banyan, and we started to get involved in physical mediumship, one of the mediums came to visit one day, and the day that he arrived, one of our large dogs passed to the spirit world. He was only about 6 or 7 years old, but he was about 55 kilos. He was a big dog. And he passed to the spirit world. And in the seance that took place the following evening, he rematerialized in the seance, came out of the cabinet, walked over to me and barked. He then walked over to Stephen and barked, and then went back to the cabinet. Now, you have dogs, you know that you recognize their bark.
Yes.
In addition to that, we had wooden flooring in the center at that time, because in those days, we didn't have the dedicated room. We used to hold the sittings in the reception area. And you could hear his claws as he walked on the floor.
Wow.
In the reception room before he disappeared. And that was 17 hours after he passed. So as emotional as that was, from that point forward, you know, it really just confirmed everything that I believed. And nothing will ever change my mind that, you know, about where we go when it's time to close our eyes to the physical world.
And where do we go? I mean, we go to the spirit world, but what have you been told that that's what it's like?
There are many different views, because everybody views the spirit world differently. What I've learned from the people that have spoken to us over the years is that we go to what's termed as the place of familiarity. It is within the spirit world, but it's probably the densest place of matter within there, where things are very similar to the world that we're used to here. And within that environment, you can create your own reality, and you can stay there for as long as you like. Now, Maurice Barbanell, when he passed to the spirit world, he communicated his thoughts, which are written in a book, the name of which slips my mind at the moment. But he said, you have to be very careful when you arrive in the spirit world, because you can get lost in your own reality. And what he meant by that was, you create this reality and you become so immersed in it that it keeps you there, and you can, but the reality is you can stay there for as long as you like. People talk about getting lost in the spirit world. I don't think anybody gets lost. They may choose to stay in that environment for an extended period of time because they're comfortable with it. They may want to wait for others to join them, who there are love ties to, or family ties to. And we're told it's a place of love. There's no place for hatred. But the one thing that does make me smile every time I think about it is that we're able to communicate directly with our animal friends when we go to the spirit world, because they work on the vibration of thought. They hear thoughts, and of course we can communicate with our pets, our animals, in exactly the same way. And that's one thing that I dearly look forward to when I get to the spirit world.
Me too. Yes, I've interviewed a few animal communicators, and that's how they communicate with animals, telepathy. And Daisy, our oldest dog, she sees spirit all the time. I mean, my daughter and I are always, just last night, it's like Daisy's seeing spirit. She just like looks around, and it's just very cool. But I look forward to that too. So
Absolutely.
Well, Nic, we need to wrap it up, but before we do, I want you just to briefly talk about Soul Quest. And then I wanted to talk about the Children's Hospital or hospice where you raise funds for them and do work for them.
Very good. Well, Soul Quest was brought to us by the communicator of a good friend of ours, and the communicator is called Morning Star. And shortly after we opened Banyan, Morning Star came to address a small group of people at Banyan. And he said to us, within your world, he said, there are many mediums who bring messages of comfort to people within your world. And he said, and that's wonderful. But what we need is a small group of people to sit, to channel love and energy for us to use for the benefit of Earth, for the benefit of mankind, and things of that nature. So we started to sit. We used to sit once a month, the first Sunday of each month, and on occasions, Morning Star would come and address us and tell us how things were progressing, how the energy was being used. And of course, and then that happened for about 10 years, and then COVID came along, and we decided we should do that every Sunday because there was a greater need. There were far more people in need of healing at that time. The virus needed to come under control, so we felt it necessary to sit at least once a week, and we continue to do that. We sit, we have a contemplation. My inspirers come and they'll say a few words at the beginning, and then we just sit in contemplation for a period of time. It's more important, I think, at the moment. We seem to now be getting COVID under control, but we now have warmongers who are keen to cause destruction in certain parts of the world. And it's equally important that we go forward with even more healing to settle those minds and to bring healing to all those who are suffering as a result of that. So SoulQuest is going to be with us for a little while. I see in the fullness of time that it may drop back to being once a month, but not until we've met the need of what's taking place here at the moment. There have been, over the years, there have been many experiments that have been done, intention experiments by a number of people. And they find that the greater the number of people you bring together and focus on one thing can bring about huge influence to that thing. And that's really what SoulQuest is all about. It's 3 o'clock UK time every Sunday. If you like, you can go to soulquest.org.uk and you'll find all the details there. It's via Zoom, and we'll continue that for as long as we can.
It's interesting you said that, because just a few days ago I interviewed Roger Nelson, who's at Princeton, a professor, and he works within the Global Consciousness Project, or he actually started that, and it's all about the scientific part of bringing all this energy together, and and it truly does change the just globally, it just changes the consciousness and the energy, yes, and raises the vibration. Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
Yes, it really is. Research. It is. And just briefly a little bit about the Children's Hospice where you work.
Okay, when we started to hold physical sittings at Banyan, around about Christmas time, there was very special events where we'd ask the sitters to bring along toys for the children, and the spirit world will bring forward children who hadn't had the Christmas experience that many of us are fortunate enough to have had. And they would bring them forward, they would materialize in the sounds room, and they would rip the paper off these presents and have the time of their life. The scientists in the spirit world were able to take etheric copies of the toys that they could actually take back with them. And of course, these toys had been touched by the spirit world. So they had an energy that was quite unique. And we wanted to be able to do something special with them. And we thought, well, what better than to donate them to the children at the hospice Now, Demel's hospice for children, they work with around about 600 children, the majority of whom are terminally ill. And we also receive lots of donations at those sit-ins. Yes. So over the Christmas period, each year, we collect as much as we can in donations. We do various online events with, usually with the Austin Wish Circle, and all that money would go directly to the children's hospice. Steve and I had the great pleasure in delivering all the toys each year, which actually towards the end began to get a little bit out of control, because we were taking something like 10 or 12 sacks of toys to the children's hospice. And they said if there was any way that you could actually bring cash instead of the toys, we very much appreciate it. And of course, that became much more of a need in recent times, because most of the fundraising events were not possible because of COVID. And we have continued to do that each year, and will continue to do it for as long as we possibly can. A charity very, very dear to my heart. There's also a very similar establishment very close to us here, called Darien House, that my parents were very much involved with when they were alive. They would raise funds and do things for them too. So very, very important that we take care and do whatever we can for those souls who are only here for a brief period of time.
Well, thank you for that. And people can find out on your website how to donate if they'd like. And we'll talk about that in 1 second. So, excuse me. Do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to close with today?
Goodness. One that is mentioned by many, many people, but I believe to be so true: to live for today, live for the moment, because you can't change what's gone in the past, and we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. So no point in worrying about tomorrow. Just live for today and enjoy life as best you can.
Oh, thank you so much. And if people want to find you, Nic, how would they do that?
Okay, anybody that would like to join us for Soul Quest, it is www.soulquest.org.uk. If anybody's interested in purchasing a copy of my book, they can do that preferably via the Spiritual Truth Foundation. So that is www.spiritualtruthfoundation.org. And you can place orders there, or alternatively, it is available on Amazon, but we'd much prefer you to buy it directly from the website, because the funds from the sales of all the Silver Birch books, they go to the Spiritual Truth Foundation, which looks after spiritualists who fall on hard times. So it's a non-profit organization. All the funds go back into supporting mediums who've served the spiritualist movements in their life, who are in need of a little bit of help at the end of their days. And those were Maurice Barbanell's wishes, and we honor them today as much as we are possibly able to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And it's so great to see you again. And thank you for all your valuable information and once again, your beautiful book, Science and Spirit, A Healing Journey.
Thank you, Marla. It's lovely to be invited back, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, yes. You take care and have a great rest of the day.
And you. Thanks ever so much, Marla. Bye for now.